Hello and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, and this is a show where we talk about games, gaming, game design, board games, reviews, how to become an author, writing processes, anything tangentially related to gaming. We're going to talk about it here. And today we're talking about Savage Worlds. We're in a series on Savage Worlds, and actually we're going to, thanks to Tinker Hellraiser for putting together a great infographic that I'm going to share on our social medias later today, where we're just going to cover, it shows what we're going to cover in the next month looking at Savage Worlds. Before we get into it, hello to John and Rook. Good to see you both. So this is Savage Worlds. It's a wonderful game that is fast, furious, and fun. We're currently running it on Tuesday nights, tonight actually, on the Iconic Production channel. You can check out our Crucible of Realms game. As well as for the Iconic patrons, I'm running 2 different Savage Worlds games this month, and probably another one every month from now till probably Gen Con. Now, when I got asked about Savage Worlds and what people wanted to hear about, somebody said, hey, why not talk about Savage Worlds versus Dungeons and Dragons? As if I could put them both in an arena, give them swords and shields, and have them hack each other apart. Now, while that's cool and would probably make a very interesting animated YouTube video, one of the things that I commit to on this show is talking about things that are beautiful, talking about things that inspire me. So this is going to be less of a, here's what one system does wrong and here's what the other system does right, but speaking to the strengths of each. And I think it's always good and okay to look at Dungeons and Dragons in relationship to basically any other role-playing game for several reasons. One, it is the market dominator. It is reaching the point where its name is becoming synonymous with the activity. I know a lot of people who say, yeah, I play Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, well, what do you play? Well, we're playing Forbidden Lands. Like, well, you're playing Forbidden Lands. It's a role-playing game. It's not Dungeons and Dragons. I think we're actually hitting a point where, sorry, I need some more coffee. That is proprietary epinome. I was going to use that, John, and I've been accused of using a lot of terms. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Have a Benny. So yeah, like Q-tip, right? Q-tips are actually cotton swabs, but the brand name has become the proprietary name for things. Xerox, if anybody even remembers Xeroxing things anymore. Also, it's the lingua franca. Most things in Dungeons and Dragons have become dispersed in our culture in a way that even people who don't play Dungeons and Dragons sort of understand. Hit points. A lot of the monsters are very familiar. If you play video games, modern day role-playing games, some directly, some indirectly, are tied directly to the foundational game of our hobby. So it's always a fair thing to hold up Dungeons and Dragons as the mirror, or the, I won't say ideal, but the well, again, the lingua franca, the common tongue, the baseline for other games. So I've talked a lot about Dungeons and Dragons on the show, and I think one thing that D&D does really well is, depending on the edition, it does really well at either the epic or the high fantasy genre. Larger than life heroes battling larger than life foes in a mythical or near mythical world filled with magic and monsters, and where the heroes kind of embody archetypes of the fantasy genre. I think it shines best as a dungeon delving adventure game. There's nothing wrong with that. I love dungeon delving adventure games. You can't see it, but over there I have an entire shelf dedicated to Dungeons and Dragons, one of the big IKEA shelves. So 5-6 individual shelves filled with books that are just D&D. It's great. I love it. but I don't think it does some things as well as others. I think the more you press outside of that dungeon delving adventure game, high fantasy, epic fantasy adventure game, the more the core conceits of the game break down. I also think that Dungeons and Dragons, and we've talked about this a little on the show before, really has 4 distinct styles of play. As Rook and I have talked about, right? You have levels 1 to 5, which is really kind of your 0 to kind of understanding your place in the world. Levels 6 to 7 are your heroic level, or sorry, 6 to 10 are your heroic levels. 11 to 15 are your wuxia sort of almost super heroic mythic demigod levels. And then when you hit level 16 and up, you are gods and superheroes in the world. So there are these tiers that kind of ramp up. And again, because it's archetypal, when you play an archetype, you are sort of, to certain degrees, locked in to the archetype that you have chosen. Hey, good to see you, Christian. He says, you agree, like you said, it's fragile as a system with respect to what it can do. Yes, I would agree with that. It does what it does really well. Once you break out of that, you are either going to have to house rule a bunch of things, in which case you are halfway to designing your own game, or you are going to have to ignore a lot of the core conceits to get what you want done. It's the whole reason why we have a ton of different games on the market. D&D does not do great at, or let me rephrase that, modern Dungeons & Dragons, 5th edition, does not do great at a survival horror investigative genre. Sure, there are rules for it, but I would argue Call of Cthulhu beats that every time, because it's designed around that core conceit. Dungeons & Dragons is designed around the core conceit that we are engaged in a war of alignment, go check out our alignment videos, and that by defeating the lesser foes that stand of chaos that stand against us, we can get more powerful and therefore shore up the bastions of law and protect that which we love. Or, if you prefer the modern variation of that, we kill monsters and take their stuff so we can kill more monsters and take their stuff. Yes, Rook, it is about being a big damn hero. So what does Savage Worlds bring to the table that D&D doesn't? And I think there's a lot of people online now. Something happened in January. We're not going to talk about it. Are looking for other games. They're starting to branch out. They're starting to look at what else is out there. And I know January was a great month for Savage Worlds. Oh, John, we should have a whole episode on what Vancian fantasy means, because it does. It's amazing. It is Vancian fantasy. I don't know that very many people playing today understand Vancian fantasy, and so a lot of the more, again, like alignment, a lot of the kludgier rules in 5th edition, I'm going to put kludgier in air quotes, is actually because people don't get the roots, right? If you know Vancian fantasy, you go, this magic system makes sense. If not, spell slots are a very difficult concept to incorporate into the world. Maybe not for players to understand, but to sort of broadly understand in the setting of the world. Now, Savage Worlds' roots came out of Deadlands, a very pulpy Western horror game, which we've played on the Iconic Production channel and we love. Rook, I would like you to copy all of these out and put them on our Patreon, because these are all, these need to be on t-shirts or on stickers. Speaking of our Patreon, let me see if I can do this real quickly. I've been told that I'm bad about providing links to things. I will provide them later. You can jump over to the Iconic production Patreon, patreon.com/iconicproduction, or I'll ask Rook to put it in the chat right now. I'm getting better at doing these live streams. So anyway, Savage Worlds came out of that game. And one of the things that's been very interesting to watch about Savage Worlds as it has moved from iteration to iteration. Deadlands, Savage World Explorer, Savage World Deluxe, Suede, is the fact that instead of completely redesigning the system, which is something that we as D&D fans have sort of dealt with since the end of the second edition era, right? First and second edition were pretty close. Minute rule changes, power, at least at the start, right? By the time you hit the player's option books, it's essentially a different game. Radically different redesign between 2 and 3, radically different redesign between 3 and 4, radically different redesign between 5 or 4 and 5. What Savage Worlds and Pinnacle has done is they have said what works and what can we chip away. There's essentially two design philosophies at work here. One is we have to completely tear down what came before and rebuild it so that it works better, the D&D philosophy, although they're getting away with that apparently with this new version of D&D that is coming out next year. And the Savage World philosophy that a perfect game is one not which I can no longer add anything to, but that which I cannot chip away from. And Suede has constantly Savage Worlds has constantly chipped away at their game to give you a very streamlined, intuitive system going forward. So what does Savage Worlds do well? Well, I think it does pulp heroic great. You do feel like the hero. The other thing I think it does well is it really does well this customization. You should check out on the Pinnacle stream. Christian and I were on last Thursday talking with other aces, which are a production people who are fans who are making Savage Worlds content out there in the world. And we talked about what's great about it. The simplest way to house rule Savage Worlds is through what's called setting rules. You get to put together a list of rules that change the way the games work, and they give you a ton of them across a great number of companions and other books. So if you want a game that can be picked up and set in different places, Savage Worlds is a great way to do it. Right? We were just talking about D&D. Well, they have Savage Pathfinder. Now, I will argue, and I haven't played a lot of Savage Pathfinder, so please bear with me on this. I don't know that it would replicate, I don't think it's trying to replicate the Vancian power fantasy, the Vancian epic fantasy feel that D&D does. Because in Savage Worlds, unless you're fighting a wild card, your heroes are going to churn through mooks. So a lot of the, hey, we've got to fight these monsters in order to get more powerful to go out and fight other monsters, is sort of removed from the economy of Savage Worlds, which is a great thing. A lot of players don't like the grind. A lot of players don't like a lot of the fiddlier bits in 5th edition. Light sources, or a lot of different light rules, encumbrance, things like that. Savage Worlds streamlines that. Also, if you like Dungeons and Dragons and you like Savage Worlds, you need to go check out, and I'll put a link in the show notes on YouTube. Christian has just released Savage Eberron, and it is a damn good book. If you like Eberron and you want a set of rules to play Savage Worlds with Eberron, this book is amazing. You can go get the PDF off of his website. Thank you. This book is great, and I want to get an actual play of it at the table sometime in this summer. When that happens, I'll reach out, see if you're free to join in, get John, you, and Rook into a Savage Eberron game. I think that could be a lot of fun. Yes, Savage Worlds is more using Savage Worlds to play in the setting, not to emulate Pathfinder. And that's a piece of advice that we're going to talk about when we get to writing for Savage Worlds, which is one of the behind the screens we're going to do. The goal of Savage Worlds is not to beat for beat replace every mechanic or feeling that a system has. So if you were trying to port Forbidden Lands, you're not trying to come up with every rule. The goal with Savage Worlds is the feeling and the experience at the play, and not so much a simulationist, here's how everything would work, right? If I were to do a Savage Glorantha setting, my goal is not to bring strike ranks over to Savage World. My goal would be to, what are the things that feel most Gloranthan, and then how do I adapt setting rules for that? So, I guess what does this boil down to? Not to bury the lead, but I think if you like Dungeons & Dragons and you like that experience, you should stay with Dungeons & Dragons. It's a great game. It provides a very unique experience, and it does it very well. D&D does very well for playing games of D&D. Again, it is a fragile system. I'm going to steal that. The more you push at things, the more... And we just take a look at alignment. We did 4 videos on how if you pull alignment out of the game, things start to break down. Look at all of the attempts to put a social mechanic on top of 5th edition. It's tough. It ends up either being a mini game completely out of itself, or it requires a lot of additional rules and tinkering and moving back and forth. If you're looking for something to try, and again, there's a lot of reasons you may want to try another game, Savage Worlds is a great place to start. If you want to play in a D&D-esque world, grab the Fantasy Companion or Savage Pathfinder. Great books to get the feel of a Vancian high fantasy world without all of the mechanics that go around with it in D&D. Savage Worlds is a lot more cinematic. I think at its core, we're going to go to... There was something in the early 2000s called GNS theory. And while I think most things are more of a scatter plot on this, these 3 axes, as opposed to strictly only one or the other, we're going to talk a little bit about it. There was a indie game community called The Forge. And if I remember correctly, Ron Edwards was the one who put forth the GNS theory. And GNS stands for Gamist, Narrativist, and Simulationist. And essentially what these 3 styles are, they're 3 styles of game design. In the Gamist theory of game design is the game is a game and it should be fun. 13th Age is probably the best gamist design I've ever seen. Every mechanic in there is designed to be fun to use or to have used against you. Provokes interesting choices. Narrativist is completely concerned with the story. What mechanics are in place to help tell the story that everyone at the table has agreed upon to tell. And Simulationist says, hey, we're in a world, and that world has rules, and the rules should reflect the reality of the world, regardless of whether it is the best narrative choice or the best fun choice. RuneQuest and Call of Cthulhu and Adventurer Conqueror King are, damn good examples of simulationist games. So I would argue that D&D falls heavily on the gaming side, with moving towards the center of simulation and narrative. Now, on the flip side, I would say that Savage Worlds is more rooted in the narrative side, skewing towards the gamist side. I don't know that Savage Worlds really cares about simulation. All of its rules are internally consistent, which makes it a great game. However, all of the dials you get to play with as a GM mean that it is perfectly, it has a rule to help make sure the narrative moves forward. We talked a little bit about this. Do you like tactical combat? Do you think that this one fight, this one fight is so important that it needs the minis and the breakouts and all of the cool terrain and counting squares because you need to know where everyone is at, because you want everyone focused on this one fight to the exclusion of everything else? It has that. Its default dial does really well with Theater of the Mind, like we do on the Crucible of Realms show. It's wonderful. Just enough interesting rules to keep the combat moving and being very exciting and fast, but not getting ground out into the minutia of how many squares am I away, how many people are within the actual radius of my my burst or my area of effect. Excuse me. And then all the way up to, let's just abstract this whole mass combat, or you fighting your way through the warehouse to get to the cool fight at the end. Quick encounters, mass combat, dramatic tasks. These are all things that we can use because Savage World is focused on the cinematic narrative action of the game. It's very pulpy. And by that I mean the characters are the focus, like they are in a D&D game, but everything is fast and it moves at a very furious pace. Your goal is to keep things moving. I think I've talked about this before. In Savage Worlds, my default assumption is if the game is slowing down, someone kicks in the door with the clue that the players need. Now, that doesn't mean that the players don't have agency and they can't go down false rabbit trails and they can't, die. But the game rewards fast, furious, and fun play. So which is better? That's not for me to decide or to tell you. I love running D&D, and I love running Savage Worlds. I have about 6 campaigns for each that I'm always constantly noodling on. But the largest amount of gamers in our world today are probably D&D players. So why do a video like this? Well, Iconic loves all games. We talk about a ton of different games. And if you haven't played Savage Worlds, I highly recommend checking it out. It's not an expensive book. This book has everything you need to run it. It's got the powers, it's got monsters, it's got the core rules, it's got the character creation rules, all for $40. So for less than the price of one D&D book, you get what's essentially covered in all 3 D&D books. Also, if you are the kind of person who is constantly house ruling and pushing and poking and trying to hammer D&D into something else, then I would recommend Savage Worlds for 2 reasons. One, you may find a rule set that fits the style of game you are looking at better. But 2, I personally think as a game designer and as a game author, the thing that has helped me most become a better game designer and game author is reading a bunch of other games. I don't need to play them, although I do. You don't need to play them. What you need to do is be exposed to different design mentalities and different design options. Whether that inspires you to replicate an option or sends you off in a different direction, reading other people's works and systems helps make you a better designer. Yes, Kristen points out the PDF's only $10. I will put links in the show notes for where you can get the physical book, where you can get the PDF, where you can get Savage Eberron and get your post-Last War noir detective stories set in Sharn on in Savage Worlds. So, that was my D&D versus Savage Worlds video. Thanks for everyone for jumping in on this. Also, thanks for Rook for creating this delightful new trend of summing up all role-playing games in one sentence, I do Genesis, or as I pronounce it, Genesis. Buy these dice. That basically sums up the Genesis system. That is wonderful. Yes, and that's the thing. As we design games, so John Wick, again, the game designer, I will very rarely talk about John Wick, the action hero. John Wick, the game designer, has this thing where he says, hey, if you think you come up with some cool new mechanic, Greg Stafford did it, 40 years ago and probably worded it better than you did. Well, yes, we do innovate mechanics. The truth of the matter is there are really only so many ways dice, tokens, and words can interact. By looking at someone else's design, you can become inspired or say, hey, I didn't even think of that being a solution to my specific problem. I'm going to, as my wife does, she makes cards for people. And she and her friends have a phrase, they call it casing. Case, copy and steal everything. They will routinely go out on the internet and look at other people's card designs as inspiration for their own. This is a master's class in how to put together a rule book, how to design mechanics that work together, all from a base mechanic that is unified all the way through. As we mentioned with D&D, if you go back and look at first and second edition D&D, the number of subsystems are staggering. And some of those have been smoothed out in later editions, but if you look, you can still see the seams where they welded things together. I would say the game that has the most clear weld lines is Palladium. That thing is basically first edition D&D welded to the Call of Cthulhu insanity and skill system, and you're like, oh, I can clearly see where you have joined these two things together. Now, actually, for me, that is what sold me on Savage Worlds. I love the world of Rifts. I struggle with the rule system these days. If there's ever a game that needs a new edition, Kevin, if you're listening, I would be glad to redesign the Rifts system to something a little bit more modern. But I don't need to because I have Savage Rifts. And Savage Rifts is beautiful. It does not seek to replicate the Rifts system beat for beat in Savage Worlds. But it does feel like Rifts when you play it. So that's all we have for today. I will make sure that I put links to the Savage Worlds PDF, the Savage Worlds core book, and Savage Eberron, or Eberron for Savage Worlds. Also, if you remember the first Eberron book which came out, it's just a beautiful love letter to the layout and design of that original book. So, thank you to everybody who tuned in. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing here on Twitch, over at YouTube, or joining us on the Iconic Production Patreon. You can join us there and get access to our Discord. As John Doom has said, it is a ton of fun. We have a lot of fun chatting about things. You get to comment and add to topics that we're going to discuss here on Behind the Screen. Tonight, we have our Crucible of Realms game. So if you are interested in Savage Worlds or like Savage Worlds, jump in tonight and enjoy the show. We are going to be continuing with our Welcome to the City adventure. I think we've got this episode or this session and one more, and that'll bring our first adventure arc to a close. I will be sharing drink recipes. We have several drinks that have been inspired by Crucible that we're going to see how they work tonight. So if you enjoy cocktails, there should be some recipes for you tonight. Thursday, we're going to be back with Behind the Screen. And then this weekend, we have a ton of things going on the Iconic Production channel. We have Exploring Glorantha at 10 a.m. On Saturday morning. And then at 7:30 at night on Sunday, we will be starting our 13th Age 2nd Edition playtest. So feel free to join us for all of this. We'll be back talking more about Savage Worlds here on Thursday. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. Thank you to everybody who has jumped in the chat, to John, to Rook, to Tink, and to Christian. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you all on Thursday. Have a good one.